The psychology of people who prefer being alone and why society keeps getting them wrong. Script, there's a very specific moment that reveals a lot about a person. Someone says, "Big party this weekend," and instantly, without sadness, without fear, without resentment, their mind drifts somewhere else. Not to excuses, not to anxiety, but to relief. A quiet evening, a familiar room. Their own thoughts, uninterrupted. And almost immediately, society steps in with a label. Antisocial, lonely, emotionally closed off. Something must be wrong. But what if that entire assumption is backwards? What if choosing solitude isn't a red flag, but a sign of psychological clarity? Because psychology has finally started to separate two things we spent decades confusing: being lonely and choosing to be alone. One is a wound. The other can be a strength. And the difference between them changes everything. The mistake psychology made for decades for most of modern psychological history. People who enjoyed being alone were lumped into a single vague category: introverts, loners, withdrawn personalities. And worst of all, antisocial. That word alone did massive damage. Because antisocial doesn't mean likes solitude. It means hostility toward others, lack of empathy, disregard for social rules. But enjoying your own company has nothing to do with any of that. Yet culturally, we treated it like a warning sign. If you preferred quiet weekends, you were missing out. If you canceled plans, you were avoiding life. If you ate alone, people assumed something was wrong. No one stopped to ask a simpler question. What if some people genuinely feel better when they're alone? Not because they're afraid, not because they're broken, but because solitude restores them. That question changed everything. The concept that changed the conversation. Unsociability. In the mid-2010s, psychologists began separating different reasons people withdraw socially. One key contribution came from researchers at the University at Buffalo. We introduced clearer distinctions between social anxiety, avoiding people out of fear, social withdrawal, pulling back due to distress, antisocial behavior, hostility or disregard for others, unsociability, a preference for solitude without fear or resentment. Unsociability isn't avoidance. It's not rejection. It's not loneliness. It's neutrality. You can connect. You just don't need constant connection. And when researchers looked closely at people who scored high in unsociability, the results surprised them. These individuals were not more depressed, not more dysfunctional, not socially impaired. In many cases, they were doing just fine or better than average, emotionally stable, self-directed, comfortable with themselves. That alone forced psychology to reconsider decades of assumptions. Alone versus lonely. A critical psychological difference. Loneliness is not about physical isolation. Loneliness is perceived disconnection. You can be surrounded by people and still feel profoundly lonely. And you can be alone for days and feel completely at peace. Psychologically, loneliness activates stress systems. It increases cortisol. It's associated with anxiety, depression, and rumination. Chosen solitude does the opposite. It lowers overstimulation. It allows emotional regulation. It gives the nervous system room to breathe. This is why the same external behavior, being alone, can either harm or heal depending on why it's happening. And this brings us to the brain. What's actually happening in the brain of people who enjoy solitude? Here's where many popular scripts go wrong. They oversimplify neuroscience. So let's be precise. It's not that introverts have less dopamine or that extroverts need people to feel anything. That's not how dopamine works. What research does suggest is this: people differ in stimulation sensitivity. Some nervous systems reach optimal arousal quickly. Others need more input to feel engaged. For people who enjoy solitude, social environments can push them past their optimal stimulation level. Too much noise, too many cues, too much demand. Solitude brings them back into balance. This aligns with classic theories like a Sunk's arousal theory and modern research on sensory processing sensitivity. It's not about being antisocial. It's about regulation. The role of the prefrontal cortex, now here's something well supported. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for reflection, planning, meaning-making, and creative synthesis, often becomes more active during uninterrupted, low-stimulus states. That doesn't mean solitude makes everyone smarter, but it does create the conditions for deeper thought. When external input decreases, internal processing increases. That's why insights happen on solo walks, ideas arrive in the shower, clarity appears late at night when the world is quiet. This isn't romantic myth, it's cognitive science. Many creative breakthroughs occur during default mode network activation, brain state associated with quiet wakefulness and internal reflection. And solitude makes that state accessible. Why creativity and solitude are historically linked. This is not coincidence. Einstein worked alone for long stretches. Newton developed calculus during isolation. Virginia Woolf argued that creativity requires a room of one's own. Maya Angelou famously rented hotel rooms just to ride away from everyone. This wasn't isolation due to dysfunction. It was deliberate withdrawal to think clearly. Solitude wasn't an escape, it was a tool. But here's the line we have to draw now. Pause. Because not all solitude is healthy, and pretending it is would be dishonest. There's a crucial difference between choosing solitude and hiding in solitude. Psychologist Abraham Maslow captured this perfectly. He suggested that healthy solitude comes from abundance, not scarcity. You enjoy being alone because you know connection is available, not because it feels impossible. Healthy solitude sounds like, I need space to think. I recharge alone. I like my inner world. Unhealthy withdrawal sounds like, it's safer this way. People always disappoint. Connection hurts too much. Both deserve compassion. But they are not the same psychological state. And confusing them leads people to either shame themselves or avoid growth. Solitude does not mean incomplete. One of the most damaging cultural narratives is this idea that humans are unfinished alone. My other half, you complete me. Better together. It sounds romantic. But psychologically, it creates dependency. People who are comfortable alone often don't buy into this narrative. They don't see themselves as missing pieces. They see themselves as whole systems. And research supports this. Studies on single adults who embrace solitude, not those forced into it, show something interesting. They often maintain broader social networks. They invest more evenly in friendships, family, and community. They're less likely to place all emotional needs on one person. That's not avoidance, that's balance. Why solitude can improve relationships? Here's the paradox most people miss. People who enjoy being alone often show up better socially. Why? Because they're not depleted. They're not resentful. They're not seeking someone to fix their emptiness. They've already sat with themselves. The quality of your alone time directly impacts the quality of your social time. When solitude restores you, connection becomes a choice, not a need, and that changes everything. A cultural perspective we ignore in some cultures. This isn't controversial at all. In Japan, solo activities are normalized. Solo dining, solo karaoke, single-seat movie theaters. There's even language that neutralizes being alone rather than pathologizing it. Meanwhile, in many Western societies, being alone is treated like a failure state. Why are you eating alone? Why didn't anyone come with you? Are you okay? As if solitude requires an explanation. That cultural bias shapes how people judge themselves. So what does this mean for you? If you genuinely enjoy being alone, you're not broken. You're not emotionally deficient. You're not avoiding life. Your nervous system restores itself differently. Your mind processes depth internally. Your sense of self doesn't require constant reflection from others. That's not weakness. That's psychological independence. But here's the self-check that matters. Can you connect when you want to? Do you trust at least a few people? Is solitude something you choose, Not something you hide behind? Yes, there's nothing to fix. If not, there's nothing to be ashamed of. Just something worth exploring. The real superpower in a world of constant noise, endless notifications, and pressure to always perform socially. The ability to enjoy your own company is rare. It means you can sit with your thoughts, tolerate silence, process emotions without distraction. That's not antisocial. That's emotional regulation. So the next time someone questions why you canceled plans, or why you prefer staying home, or why you don't feel the need to be surrounded by people, you don't need to explain dopamine or neuroscience. You can just say, because I like myself. And that answer usually says more than anything else ever could.